The scent of coconut oil filled the small room, mixing with the faint smell of burning wood from the kitchen stove. The village outside was alive with laughter, drumming, and the sweet sounds of festival preparations. But inside, Adana sat silently on a wooden stool, her knees pressed together, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. She was 14, but something about her posture made her seem older, shoulders drawn, eyes distant. Her hair fell in thick black waves down her back, carefully detangled and moisturized just as her late mother had taught her. It was the one thing she had left of her. No jewelry, no photos, just her hair. Behind her stood Clara, her stepmother, a tall woman with cold eyes and perfectly arched brows. Clara moved with the efficiency of someone used to being obeyed. Her mouth was tight, expression unreadable as she plugged in the metal straighteners, the kind that always hissed before they bit. "You need to look presentable," Clara said, her voice flat. "Can't have people thinking you come from the bushes." Adana said nothing. The village elders had announced the nominees for Festival Queen just 3 days earlier. When Adana's name was called, there was a pause in the crowd, then wild cheering. She had never imagined being chosen. Enna, Clara's daughter, was always the one in the spotlight. Clara hadn't spoken to Adana since. The straighteners clicked open and closed like jaws. Clara began to section the hair. "You're lucky they picked you," she muttered. "They don't usually choose girls like you." Adana's fingers curled tighter in her lap. The iron clamped down on the first section, hot but tolerable. Then Clara paused and pressed again, harder, this time directly against Adana's scalp. A sharp, stinging sound broke the air. Adana screamed. The smell of burnt hair filled the room. Before she could recover, Clara did it again. Another burn, another scream. "Stop moving!" Clara snapped, yanking Adana's head back. "Look at the mess you've made!" Tears streamed down Adana's face as she reached up and touched the spot. Her scalp was blistering hot. Chunks of hair now hung limp and half singed. Clara set the iron down and looked her up and down with a smirk. "There, now you look like someone from your real class." She walked out. Adana stumbled to her room, shut the door, and collapsed on her mat, burying her face in her pillow. Her dreams of standing on that stage, her mother's memory wrapped in her long hair, gone. Outside, the drums grew louder, but inside, something in Adana had gone silent. The sun had barely risen when Adana stirred from her mat, her scalp still sore from the night before. She moved slowly, careful not to disturb the burn. The once shiny strands of her hair were now uneven, some pieces melted together, others completely gone. She stood before the cracked mirror, her eyes empty, her pride shattered. The memories came back like waves crashing against stone. She was 7 when her mother, Amaka, died of malaria. It was quick. 1 week she was laughing, dancing in the rain with Adana, and the next, she was gone. Adana remembered the scent of her mother's skin, lemongrass and shea butter, and the sound of her lullabies. The house was never the same afterward. Ikenna, her father, remarried less than a year later. Clara came into their lives like a windstorm, young, sharp-tongued, and with 2 children trailing behind her, Enema and little Tabena. At first, she played the part of the grieving widow who wanted a fresh start, but it didn't take long for her mask to slip. Adana remembered the first time Clara slapped her. It was over a broken teacup that Tabena had dropped. Ikenna had been standing in the doorway, watching. He said nothing. That silence grew like a weed. Her father, once the man who carried her on his shoulders and called her his sunshine, had become a ghost in his own house. He left early for work, came home late, and rarely made eye contact. Clara filled the silence with commands. Sweep that floor, fetch that water, wash Enema's uniform, and punishments when Adana didn't move fast enough. In public, Clara was the perfect wife and stepmother. She donated to the church, organised choir rehearsals, and brought fresh plantains to the pastor every Sunday. People called her a woman of strength, a blessing to Ikenna. But behind closed doors, she rationed Adana's food, mocked her hair, her skin tone, her clothes, and she never forgot to remind Adana she didn't belong. "You're not my child. You're just the leftover from another woman's mess." The only softness in Adana's life came from 2 sources. One was her late mother's diary, hidden carefully beneath her mattress. She would read it at night when everyone else was asleep. Her mother had written about dreams, about strength, about never letting people decide your worth. Sometimes, Adana would cry herself to sleep with the open pages clutched to her chest. The other was Mama Eve, old, sharp-eyed and gentle-handed. Mama Eve had run a tailoring shop at the edge of the village for over 40 years. She had taken a quiet liking to Adana, offering scraps of cloth and teaching her to stitch when she saw the girl sitting alone after school. "Your hands are steady," she'd say, "but your spirit needs to stop apologizing." Mama Ife's small shop became a safe haven. Adana would slip away whenever she could, spending hours learning to sew neat hems, fix zippers, and even sketch simple dress designs. For those few hours, she could forget about Clara's voice echoing in her ears. Everything changed 2 weeks ago when the village elders announced the Festival Queen nominations. Adana had been helping Mama Ife hem church robes when the announcement rang through the megaphone in the square. Her heart nearly stopped when her name was called. At first, she thought she misheard, but the murmurs confirmed it. Adana Ikena's daughter, the quiet one. Yes, her. It was one of the proudest moments of her life. The Festival Queen wasn't just a crown and a photo in the paper. It came with a scholarship, a mentorship program, and recognition from the council. It was a gateway to something bigger than the quiet suffering she endured daily. When she returned home that day, smiling cautiously, she found Clara sitting stiffly in the living room. Enema was crying in the corner, her arms folded. "You should decline," Clara said coldly. "It's obvious someone made a mistake." Adana shook her head, voice barely above a whisper. "They chose me." Clara's lips twitched, but she said no more. From that moment, the air in the house changed. It became heavier. Adana's chores doubled. Her portions of food got smaller. NMA ignored her completely, and Clara watched her like a hawk. Still, Adana prepared. She ironed her simple gown, planned her hairstyle, and imagined her mother smiling down at her from wherever she was. And then last night happened. The straightener, the burn, the destruction of the one thing she cherished most. Now, she sat at the edge of her mattress, the village alive with festival fever outside her window. The girls would be lining up soon in colourful gowns, greeting elders and smiling for the camera. Adana stared at her reflection. Clara had done more than burn her scalp. She had tried to erase her. The morning sun pushed through the worn linen curtain, brushing against Adana's swollen eyelids. Her head throbbed with a dull, pulsing ache, and as she shifted on the mat, the pain along her scalp flared. She reached up instinctively and winced. Her fingertips came away sticky, strands of hair clinging to them. Slowly, she sat up. In the mirror, her reflection made her gasp. Half of her hair was gone, burnt patches across her scalp, raw and red, surrounded by melted ends and frizzed coil. It looked like something had chewed through her crown and left it for dead. She found a scarf in her drawer, an old faded green one her mother used to wear around the house. Hands trembling, she wrapped it tightly, covering the damage as best she could. Her dress still hung by the door, pale blue cotton, hand-stitched by Mama Ife. It was supposed to be her moment, her one day. She folded it gently and placed it under her pillow. "I'm not going," she whispered to herself. "Let them forget me." Outside, the village square was buzzing. Women pounded yam for the feast. Children chased one another in painted masks, and the drummers were already warming up. At the square, the elders took their seats under the canopies. One of them leaned over to the announcer. "Where is Adana?" another asked. Wasn't she one of the three? Word began to spread, whispers among the crowd. Where was the girl with the soft voice and bright eyes? The girl who had surprised everyone with her quiet grace? Back in the compound, Mama Ife approached Adana's door with brisk footsteps. She hadn't seen the girl all morning. When no one answered her knock, she pushed the door open. Adana sat on the mat, scarf pulled low, eyes on the floor. "Mama!" Her voice cracked. "I can't." When Mama Ife pulled off the scarf, she staggered back, hand to her chest. The burns, the missing hair. It took her a moment to register it. "Who did this to you?" she asked. Adana's lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. Just then, Clara stepped into the doorway, arms folded. "She did it to herself," she said smoothly. "Tried to straighten it and burned it all off. Girls these days, too eager to look fine for boys." Mama Ife turned to Clara, her eyes sharp as blades. "You lie like you breathe." Clara shrugged, unconcerned. "Believe what you like." In the hallway, Ikenna stood motionless. He said nothing. His eyes flicked from Clara to Adana to the floor. Then he turned away. Mama Ife's nostrils flared, but she said no more. She bent, helped Adana to her feet, and led her out of the compound without another word. At her shop, She laid Adana gently on a cot. She washed the burns with cool water, ground leaves into paste, and spread them carefully over the wounds. Her hands were steady, but her chest heaved. "That woman," she muttered. "She will answer for this." Adana flinched with each dab of medicine. "I don't want to go, Mama. I just want to stay here." Mama Epha paused, looking her dead in the eye. "You will go." Adana shook her head. "They'll laugh. I'm not. Look at me. How can I walk in front of them like this?" Mama Epha cupped her chin, her voice quiet but unshakable. "You will go, child. Not for them. For your mother. For the girl who stitched that dress with her dreams. For the part of you that Clara tried to kill but couldn't. You will go, and they will see you." Adana blinked fast. A tear rolled down her cheek, followed by another. Then, slowly, she nodded. The drums in the square beat louder now, echoing through the air like a call. The village moved like a breathing thing, colourful, loud, pulsing with excitement. As the sun began its slow descent, children ran barefoot through the narrow paths, their faces painted with white clay and charcoal, shouting about who they thought would win Festival Queen. The drummers tested rhythms on hollowed wood, and women stirred giant pots of jollof rice over open fires. It was the biggest night of the year, but beneath the music and chatter, there was another current, quieter, sharper. People whispered in corners. "I heard Clara's girl will be standing in for Adana. Why would Adana miss this? She was everyone's favourite. They say she burned herself." "Burned? Haba. That girl. Never." It was the stepmother. She's always had envy in her eyes. No one said anything aloud, but the stares followed Clara through the village. She pretended not to notice, waving at the pastor's wife and nodding at the butcher's family, as if everything was fine. Emma followed behind her, shoulders straight, wearing a golden custom gown with a flared hem that shimmered in the light. It was fitted perfectly to her body, designed to draw every eye. She smiled for the villagers, waiting for the applause to begin. But even the claps were half-hearted. Back at Mama Ife's shop, Adana stood in front of a mirror that barely held its frame together. The burns on her scalp had begun to scab, but they still throbbed beneath the scarf. She wore a simple linen dress dyed in deep indigo, its stitching so clean it could have come from a city boutique. The matching head wrap was wide, elegant, shaped to curve around her head like a crown. "You look like the sun after a storm," Mama Ife whispered as she tied the final knot. "Steady, bright, and unbroken." Adana's hands shook. Her reflection felt foreign, like someone else's bravery had climbed into her skin. "I can't go," she murmured. Mama Ife's eyes didn't flinch. She stepped closer, laying a firm hand on Adana's shoulder. "There are spirits in this village, not ghosts, but watchers," she said. "The ones who know right from wrong, even when no one speaks up. Tonight, they will be watching, and they will remember who stood and who stayed silent." Adana took a deep breath, then another. Her throat felt tight, her chest heavier than her feet, but she nodded. The two of them walked slowly to the square, the village glowing with lanterns and anticipation. Clara and Emma sat in the front row directly beside the elders. Clara leaned toward one of the older women and chuckled. "Emma's been preparing all week. I told her this would be her time." The woman smiled politely, but her eyes drifted behind Clara because a hush had fallen over the crowd. Adana had entered. She walked with quiet grace, the head wrap tall and regal, her posture impossibly proud. The soft fabric of her gown caught the wind and floated behind her like water. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't need to. The murmurs began immediately. "Is that her? Ah, she came. She looks like a queen already." The same elders Clara had been flattering moments ago stood slowly to their feet, not all at once but one by one. A quiet gesture, a show of respect. Mama Ife followed behind Adana, her face unreadable, but her eyes sharp, watching. Eneme turned, her face twisting into disbelief. She stood too, ready to block Adana's way, but the master of ceremonies raised his hand. "All contestants, please take the stage." Adana didn't hesitate. She walked past Clara and Enma, not a single glance in their direction. Clara narrowed her eyes. She leaned into Ikenna, who sat beside her stiff and sweating, and hissed, "She won't win. Just watch." But Ikenna didn't reply. He hadn't spoken much since that morning. He had seen the burns, had seen the scarf, and had done nothing. Now, as Adana climbed the steps to the platform, something in him shifted, cracked even. The crowd quieted. The other contestants stood tall, their dresses vibrant and polished, their smiles perfect. But Adana held something they didn't: presence, an unspoken weight. a silence that made people look twice. Behind the stage, the MC read names from a list, preparing to start the official ceremony. But before he could begin, an elder leaned in and whispered something. Then another, and another. The drumming slowed. The night, once festive, now felt like it was holding its breath. And Adana stood at the center of it all. Clara gripped the edge of her seat, her jaw clenched so tight it trembled. But Adana, she stood taller than she ever had. She didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't flinch. She simply stood, and the whole village saw her. The MC, a stout man with a wide smile and a voice trained in ceremony, stepped up to the wooden podium at the center of the stage. The crowd leaned in with anticipation as the drums settled into a quiet heartbeat. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate the grace, strength, and spirit of the young women in our community. The Festival Queen is not just a title, but a symbol of hope, resilience, and honor." He glanced at the paper in his hand, about to announce the names of the finalists. Adana stood in her place, her back straight, her head wrap still firm despite the wind that tugged at its edges. She could feel eyes on her, dozens, maybe hundreds, but her gaze was calm, focused. The MC cleared his throat, ready to read the results, when a voice from the elders' table rose, low but firm. "Wait." All heads turned. Elder Nwakedi, the oldest and most respected of the village council, stood slowly, his cane planted firmly in the dust. "Before we crown the queen," he said, voice weathered by age but unshaking, "we must speak truth." A ripple of silence spread through the crowd. He looked out at the villagers. "This celebration means nothing if we close our eyes to what we all know and have ignored," the crowd murmured. Clara shifted in her seat, her face tightening. Then a woman near the back of the crowd stood up. Her voice was nervous at first. "I saw her," she said, pointing gently toward Clara, 3 months ago, dragging Adana by the ear across the yard. I thought maybe it was discipline, but Adana didn't speak for days after that." Another voice, this time a young man. "I live across the wall. Every night I heard crying, not from the children, from her, from Adana. I told myself it was none of my business." More people stood. A market vendor, a churchwoman, a seamstress, all with stories. Clara shouted at her like she was an animal. She once locked her outside in the rain. "I saw bruises on her back at the riverbank." Even one of the school teachers rose, her voice trembling with guilt. "She came to class with a limp. I asked what happened, but when she said she fell, I accepted it. I shouldn't have." Clara stood abruptly, her face red. "This is a witch hunt. You all enjoyed my food, my charity, We saw through your kindness," someone called back. "We just kept quiet." Clara looked to Ikenna, her last lifeline, but he wasn't standing beside her. He was standing behind Adana. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes glossy with shame. He stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I watched her destroy my child's light," he said, tears falling freely now. "And I did nothing. I wanted peace in my house, but I gave up my daughter for it." Clara's mouth fell open, but no words came. Enma, who had remained silent through it all, suddenly burst into tears. She stumbled off the stage and into the arms of a friend, sobbing uncontrollably. The elders whispered among themselves for a few long moments. Then Elder Nwakedi stepped forward again, face stern. "We do not reward cruelty with silence anymore. Clara, you are hereby stripped of all your community roles and privileges. Your name will no longer be spoken in the Women's Council." He turned to the MC. "An NMR will step down from this contest. Her mother's actions have tainted the spirit of fairness." Clara tried to speak again, but the MC raised his hand. "Enough," he said. Then he turned to Adana. "Adana Ikenna's daughter, step forward." Adana moved slowly, every step echoing across the square. "You are not chosen tonight for beauty, though you carry it. You are not chosen for charm, though you possess it. You are chosen because even when your voice was silenced, your spirit spoke louder than all of us." He placed the beaded crown gently on her head. The crowd erupted, not with noise, but with tears, with clapping, with an awe that filled the air like smoke. Adana bowed her head slightly, her eyes closing. She wasn't just the festival queen. She was proof that truth always finds its voice. The village returned to its rhythm in the days following the festival, but something had shifted. The colors looked the same. The trees swayed with the same wind, and the church bells still rang at 6 a.m. Yet an invisible weight had been lifted. A silence had been broken. Clara was gone. She had left 2 mornings after the festival queen crowning, her belongings hastily packed into a taxi, her face hidden behind dark glasses. Emma sat in the back seat, her tear-streaked face turned toward the window, refusing to look at anyone. No one waved, no one spoke, just the sound of the engine fading down the dusty road. At the village compound, Ikenna stood alone, watching the taxi disappear. His shoulders drooped, hands shaking slightly. He didn't speak much that day. That evening, he came to Mama Ife's shop, where Adana was learning how to adjust the hem of a wedding blouse. He stood awkwardly at the doorway until Mama Ife stepped aside. "I have failed you," Ikenna said softly, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I didn't protect you. I didn't see, or maybe I didn't want to see, and I will carry that shame forever." Adana didn't look away. Her voice was calm. "I forgive you, Papa, but I can't come back. Not yet." He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I'll be here if you ever change your mind." After he left, Mama Ife sat beside Adana and held her hand for a long time. A new chapter began. Adana moved in permanently with Mama Ife. What was once a tailoring shop became a small design studio. Word spread quickly. "The festival queen now makes clothes," they'd whisper at the market. But it wasn't just sewing. Adana started sketching her own designs, simple modern pieces made from local fabric, each with bold lines and hidden meanings. A red sash for bravery, a stitched flame for survival. Her clothes weren't just outfits, they were quiet stories people wore with pride. Mama Ife's business flourished. Orders came from neighboring towns, students came to learn, and Adana, now with a growing voice, began speaking at the local school. One afternoon, she stood in front of a hall full of teenage girls and said, "Abuse doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it leaves silence. But silence is something we can break." The teachers listened. The parents listened. Even the elders began to listen. Slowly, the village adopted a new code. No more looking away. A committee was formed for child welfare. Young girls were paired with mentors. And most importantly, people started speaking up. They didn't call Adana the girl Clara mistreated anymore. They called her Queen Adana, not because of the crown she wore once, but because of the fire she carried quietly and refused to let be extinguished. The night was quiet, the kind that wrapped around you like a soft cloth. Crickets hummed in the background, and the faint scent of roasted corn drifted in from a neighboring house. Adana sat on the wooden porch beside Mama Ife's old sewing machine, her knees pulled up to her chest, her mother's diary resting on her lap. The lantern beside her flickered gently, casting shadows on the pages as she wrote. "I didn't win that night because of a dress or a title," she read aloud, her voice soft, steady. "I won because the village finally chose to see me." She smiled faintly to herself, the words anchoring something deep within her. Footsteps approached, small, hesitant. Adana looked up. At the edge of the porch stood a girl, maybe 9 or 10, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She wore a torn t-shirt and held her hands tightly together, fingers picking nervously at the hem. "My aunt hits me too," the girl whispered. Can I sit with you?" Adana didn't hesitate. She stood, walked over, and opened the screen door wider. "Yes," she said gently. "You're not alone anymore." The girl stepped in, and Adana wrapped an arm around her, guiding her to the steps. They sat in silence, the stars blinking above them. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried, then quieted. Life, as always, moved forward, but something in the air had changed. Voiceover. Sometimes the spirits we wait for are the voices of the people finally waking up. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.